My parents abandoned me abroad, so I made them taste their own medicine. The notification popped up on my phone at 11:47 p.m. Prague time. Transaction declined, insufficient funds. I stared at the screen, my stomach churning as I tried to process what I was seeing. I just attempted to pay for my dorm room for next month, €450 that should have been a routine transaction from the account my parents set up for my study abroad semester. I tried again. Declined. Then I called the bank. I'm sorry, Mr. Chen, but this account was closed by the primary account holder 3 days ago, the customer service representative said in that annoyingly chipper voice they train them to use. You'll need to speak with them directly. 3 days ago. That was exactly when I'd had the fight with my parents over video call. The fight where I'd told my father that his constant criticism of my grades was suffocating me, and where I'd finally had the courage to say that maybe I wanted to major in film instead of pre-med like he'd planned my entire life. The fight where my mother had called me ungrateful and selfish before hanging up. But surely they wouldn't. I mean, what parent cuts off their 19-year-old kid in a foreign country over an argument? Mine, apparently. I called home immediately. Straight to voicemail. I called my mom's cell. Voicemail. My dad's work number. The number you have dialed is not in service. They'd blocked me. My hands were shaking as I checked my other accounts. My credit card, the one they'd insisted I take for emergencies, had been cancelled. The joint savings account where I'd been depositing money from my part-time campus job back home was frozen. Even my phone plan, which was under my dad's name, showed a notice that service would be discontinued in 48 hours. I sat on my narrow dorm bed, staring at the stack of textbooks I could no longer afford, wearing the clothes I might not be able to wash soon because the laundromat required coins I was rapidly running out of. My meal plan was paid through the end of the week. After that, I had exactly €73 in cash, money I'd saved from selling my watch to a classmate the week before to buy groceries when I was tired of cafeteria food. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd sold my watch for grocery money while having thousands in the bank. Or what I thought was thousands in the bank. My roommate Klaus was at his girlfriend's place, so I was alone when the full weight of it hit me. My parents, the people who'd raised me, who'd taught me to call them when I needed help, who'd made me promise to stay safe abroad, had abandoned me. Not just emotionally, but literally. They'd left me stranded 4,000 miles from home with less money than I'd had when I was 16 and working at a movie theater. I tried calling my Aunt Lisa, my mom's sister, but it went straight to voicemail too. Either they'd gotten to her first, or she was just asleep. It was dinner time back in California. The worst part wasn't even the money, though the practical panic was very real. It was the message. The loud and clear declaration that their love was conditional. That their support could be yanked away the moment I dared to have my own opinions about my own life. I pulled up my laptop and started researching. Student emergency loans. Work-study programs. Anything. Because if they thought this would make me come crawling back, begging forgiveness for the crime of wanting to choose my own major, they were wrong. I was going to survive this. And someday, somehow, they were going to understand exactly what they'd put me through. The next morning brought fresh humiliations. My debit card was declined at the campus coffee shop, €2.50 for a cappuccino that might as well have cost 1,000. The barista, a girl named Petra who I'd chatted with dozens of times before, gave me that look. The one that said she was trying to figure out if I was broke or if there was just some technical glitch she should politely ignore. The machine is being weird today, she said kindly, sliding the coffee across anyway. Pay me tomorrow. I nodded, my face burning with shame. Tomorrow I'd have to avoid this place entirely. By noon, I'd exhausted every official channel. The study abroad office was sympathetic but useless. Sandra, the coordinator, explained that while they had emergency protocols for stolen wallets or medical crises, family financial disputes weren't covered under any university program. She suggested I contact the American consulate, but her tone made it clear she thought this was really something I needed to work out with my parents. Surely this is just a misunderstanding, Jake, she said, adjusting her glasses. Parents don't just abandon their children abroad. Maybe try calling again. I tried calling again. 17 times since yesterday. I'd sent emails, texts, even tried reaching them through Facebook. Nothing. They'd blocked me everywhere, so thoroughly and systematically that it had to be deliberate. This wasn't anger, this was calculated punishment. The American consulate was even less helpful. The bored woman behind the bulletproof glass explained that unless I was facing imprisonment or serious medical emergency, they couldn't provide financial assistance for flights home. She handed me a photocopied list of local shelters and food banks, her expression suggesting she dealt with entitled American college kids every day. You might try contacting local churches, she said. Some have programs for Americans in distress. Americans in distress. That's what I was now. I walked back to campus through Prague's beautiful historic center, the architecture that had thrilled me just months ago now feeling like the bars of an expensive prison. Tourists everywhere, spending more on lunch than I had to my name, snapping photos of their perfect European adventure. That evening, I swallowed my pride and called my girlfriend Emma back home. We'd been together since junior year of high school, and she was one of the few people who knew how controlling my parents could be. Jake, oh my god, are you serious? Her voice crackled through the spotty Wi-Fi connection in my dorm lobby. I couldn't afford to use my phone's international plan anymore. They actually cut you off completely. Every account, every card, everything, I said, checking over my shoulder to make sure no one was listening. Emma, I need help. Can you? Of course. How much do you need? I've got like $800 in my checking account from my summer job. I can send it right now. The relief was overwhelming, but it was also temporary. $800 would buy me maybe 3 weeks if I was incredibly careful. Are you sure? I don't know when I can pay you back. Don't be stupid. We'll figure it out. But as I hung up, a new realization hit me. Emma was a college student too. $800 was probably everything she had. And when that ran out, then what? Ask my other friends to support me indefinitely. How long before they started avoiding my calls too? That night, lying in bed while Klaus snored softly across the room, I made a decision. I wasn't going to beg my way through the next 4 months, depending on handouts and charity. If my parents wanted to teach me about independence and consequences, fine. I'd learn. But I'd also remember. Every single detail of what they put me through. Every humiliation, every sleepless night, every moment of terror about where I'd sleep or what I'd eat. Because someday, they were going to get a lesson of their own. Emma's money arrived 2 days later, but it came with a catch I hadn't anticipated. The wire transfer fee ate up $45, and the exchange rate was brutal. I ended up with €687 instead of the €750 I'd calculated. Still, holding those bills felt like oxygen after drowning. My relief lasted exactly 6 hours. Jake, we need to talk. Klaus cornered me as I returned from grocery shopping, actual food for the first time in days, though I'd still bought the cheapest possible everything. My parents called. My stomach dropped. Klaus's parents were loaded. His dad was some kind of investment banker in Munich, and they paid his full expenses without blinking. But they were also the type who noticed irregularities. They got the housing bill for next semester, Klaus continued, looking uncomfortable. When they asked about you staying on as my roommate, administration told them your account was in question. What does that mean? It means they're concerned about being stuck with your half of the room fee if you can't pay. My father asked me directly if you were having financial difficulties. Klaus made air quotes, his accent making the English phrase sound even more formal. I didn't know what to say. I could read between the lines. Klaus was a good guy, but his parents controlled his money just like mine had controlled mine. If they decided I was a financial risk, they'd pressure him to request a room change. And if Klaus moved out, I'd be stuck paying for a single room I definitely couldn't afford, or get kicked out of housing entirely. How long do I have? Officially. The housing payment isn't due until October 15th. But Jake. He ran his hand through his hair. My parents want an answer by Friday about next semester. They're talking about getting me into the premium housing with the other scholarship students. Friday was 4 days away. For days to figure out how to prove I could pay €900 monthly for housing when I had under €700 total to my name. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I researched working illegally in the Czech Republic. Not because I wanted to break the law, but because my student visa only allowed 20 hours of on-campus work per week, and the campus jobs paid €8 per hour maximum. Even if I found one immediately, and there was a waiting list, I'd make maybe €640 per month. That wouldn't even cover housing, let alone food, utilities, books, or anything else. The forums I found were full of other students in similar situations, though none quite as dramatic as mine. Most were just struggling with expensive European living costs, not dealing with parents who completely cut them off. But the advice was consistent: restaurants and bars paid cash, asked fewer questions, and were always short-staffed. I walked through Prague's tourist district the next afternoon, noting which places looked busy enough to need help but sketchy enough to not scrutinize work permits too closely. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months ago, my biggest worry had been whether I'd packed enough nice clothes for European nightlife. Now I was scouting locations to work under the table just to survive. My phone buzzed with a text from my Aunt Lisa. My heart jumped, finally, someone from my family reaching out. Jake, honey, your parents told me about your situation. I understand you're going through a rebellious phase, but this has gone far enough. You need to apologize and come home. Your father is willing to pay for a flight if you call him and commit to pre-med. Think about your future. Aunt Lisa. I stared at the message for 10 minutes. A rebellious phase. That's what they were calling it. Not my right to choose my own career, not my attempt to set basic boundaries with controlling parents. A phase, like I was 15 and dyeing my hair black. The worst part was the carrot they were dangling. One phone call, one surrender, and this nightmare would end. But I'd seen who they really were now. And there was no going back from that. I deleted Aunt Lisa's message without responding and kept walking through the cobblestone streets until I found myself standing outside a busy Irish pub called Murphy's Corner. Through the windows, I could see harried waitstaff weaving between packed tables, and there was a handwritten, help wanted, sign taped crookedly to the door. The manager was a red-faced man named Declan who barely looked up from counting receipts when I walked in. You speak Czech? No, but I speak English and German, and I'm learning. English is fine. Most of our customers are tourists anyway. He glanced at me properly for the first time. You're American. Yeah, I'm studying here. I can work evenings and weekends. Something shifted in his expression, and I realized I'd made a mistake mentioning school. He was calculating visa restrictions in his head. Look, kid, I'd love to help, but with the work permits and all that paperwork. He trailed off meaningfully. I took a breath. What if the paperwork took a while to process? Like, a few weeks. Declan studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Sometimes these things do take time. Bureaucracy, you know. Meanwhile, if someone wanted to help out for tips only, just to get experience. He shrugged. Tips can be quite good here. €40, maybe €50 a night if you're fast and the tourists are drunk enough. It wasn't legal, but it also wasn't exactly illegal. A gray area I could live with. When can I start? Tomorrow night. 6 p.m. We're black. Walking back to campus, I felt something like hope for the first time in days. €50 per night, even just 3 nights a week, would give me €600 monthly. Combined with Emma's money and what little I had left, I might actually make it to Christmas break. That optimism lasted until I checked my email. Dear Mr. Chen, the message from the registrar's office began, we regret to inform you that your account has been flagged for non-payment. As of October 1st, your class enrollment will be suspended pending resolution of outstanding fees. Additionally, your student ID access to campus facilities will be restricted until payment is received. October 1st was next Tuesday. 6 days away. I scrolled through the attached breakdown with growing horror. It wasn't just next semester they were worried about. Apparently my parents had been automatically charged for various fees throughout the semester, and when those payments bounced after they closed the accounts, it triggered a review of my entire financial status. Late fees, €150. Laboratory fees for my biology course, €200. Technology fee, 75 euros. Outstanding library fines, 23 euros. Campus Recreation Center annual fee, 100 euros. Total, 548 euros, due immediately to maintain enrollment. I actually laughed out loud in the empty hallway, a slightly hysterical sound that echoed off the walls. Even if I gave them every penny I had left, I'd still be 200 euros short. And that would leave me with nothing for food or housing. My phone rang. Klaus. Jake, where are you? There's someone here from housing. What do you mean, someone from housing? A woman with a clipboard. She's measuring our room and asking about the lease agreement. She says there's been a payment inquiry about you. I closed my eyes and leaned against the wall. They weren't waiting until October 15th. Someone had decided to investigate my financial situation immediately, probably triggered by the same flags that had alerted the registrar's office. I'll be right there. As I hurried back to my dorm, my mind was racing. The job at Murphy's wouldn't pay fast enough. Emma's money wouldn't stretch far enough. And now I was facing eviction from housing on top of everything else. But there was one option I'd been avoiding. One number I could call that would end this immediately. The question was whether my pride was worth sleeping on the street. The housing administrator turned out to be a thin woman named Mrs. Novikova, who spoke English with clipped precision and had the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. She was indeed measuring our room when I arrived, Klaus hovering nervously in the corner like a kid watching his parents fight. Ah, Mr. Chen. Perfect timing. She didn't look up from her clipboard. I need to discuss your housing contract for the remainder of the semester. I understand there's been some confusion with my payments, but I can. There's no confusion. She finally met my eyes. Your guarantor has formally withdrawn financial responsibility. Your parents sent a notarized letter 3 days ago specifically declining any future obligations for your housing, meals, or academic fees. The words hit me like a physical blow. It was one thing to discover they'd cut me off, it was another entirely to learn they'd taken legal steps to ensure I couldn't somehow hold them responsible. They'd actually paid for notarization and international shipping to make sure their abandonment was official. However, Mrs. Novikova continued, university policy allows for students to maintain housing if they can demonstrate financial capability independently. You have until Monday at 9 a.m. to provide proof of funds covering the remainder of the semester. How much exactly? She consulted her clipboard with theatrical efficiency. Housing through December 20th, 1,890 euros. Mandatory meal plan, 650 euros. Outstanding fees, 548 euros. Total, 3,088 euros. 3,000 euros. I had 687 euros. And if I can't provide that proof? You'll have 48 hours to vacate the premises. Your student visa status will be reviewed, and you'll likely be required to return to the United States within 30 days. After she left, Klaus and I sat in silence for a long moment. Finally, he cleared his throat. Jake, I'm really sorry, but my parents already put in a request for premium housing. They heard about your situation and... He trailed off miserably. It's okay. And weirdly, it was. Klaus was just protecting himself the same way I was trying to protect myself. When do you move out? Next Friday. But listen, until then, you don't have to worry about me saying anything to anyone. And I've got some food you can have, Anne. Thanks, man. Really. That evening at Murphy's, I threw myself into the work with desperate energy. The dinner rush was brutal, drunk British tourists celebrating someone's birthday, a table of German businessmen who kept changing their orders, and a group of American study abroad students who made me want to hide in the kitchen because they reminded me too much of who I used to be. But Declan was right about the tips. By closing time, I'd made 67 euros in cash, more money than I'd held at once since this nightmare began. Not bad for a first night, Declan said as I helped stack chairs. You free tomorrow? Every night you'll have me. He studied my face in the dim light. Everything all right, kid? You've got that look. What look? Like someone who needs this job more than most. He was quiet for a moment. Look, I've got a friend who runs a breakfast place near the old town square. Tourist trap, but they're always short-staffed for morning shifts. Interested? 2 jobs. If I could make 60 euros per day between them, working 7 days a week. I did the math quickly. 420 euros per week, 1,680 euros per month. Still not enough for the lump sum Mrs. Novikova demanded, but maybe enough to survive if I could find somewhere else to live. Definitely interested. Walking back to campus at 1 a.m., counting my tips again like some kind of talisman, I felt something shift inside me. Not hope exactly, but determination. My parents thought they were teaching me a lesson about consequences and responsibility. Fine. I'd learn their lesson. But they were going to learn one too, eventually. About what happens when you abandon someone who survives anyway. The breakfast job at Café Europa started at 5 a.m., which meant leaving the dorm at 4:30 to catch the first tram. The manager, a perpetually exhausted woman named Hannah, hired me on the spot when Declan's friend Pavel brought me by. You make coffee. You carry plates. You smile at fat Americans who complain about no maple syrup, she asked in broken English. Yes to all of that. Good. 6 euros per hour plus tips. Cash daily. You start tomorrow. The math was working, barely. Between both jobs, I was pulling in about 85 euros per day, 7 days a week. After 2 weeks, I had 1,200 euros saved, still nowhere near the 3,088 euro Mrs. Novikova demanded, but enough to start looking for alternatives. That's when Marco appeared. I was serving overpriced cappuccinos to a table of Italian tourists when I heard someone speaking English with an American accent at the counter. Turning around, I saw a guy about my age with an expensive haircut and clothes that screamed, trust fund baby. Jake. Jake Chin. My blood went cold. Do I know you? Marco Weinstein. We met at that pre-orientation thing in Boston last spring. You were going to Prague, I was going to Vienna. He grinned widely. Small world, right? What are you doing working here? Of all the cafes in Prague, Marco fucking Weinstein had to wander into mine. I remembered him now. His dad was some big shot lawyer in Manhattan, and he'd spent the entire orientation session talking about his family's house in the Hamptons. Just picking up some extra spending money, I said, forcing a smile while internally panicking. You know how it is. Totally. My parents are always on me about learning the value of money too. He laughed. Though they'd probably die if they knew I was drinking €8 cappuccinos every day. This place is highway robbery. I nodded and tried to move away, but Marco wasn't done. Hey, we should hang out while I'm here. I'm only in Prague for 3 days, but my parents gave me this insane budget for the trip. We could hit some clubs, maybe take a day trip to Český Krumlov. My treat, obviously. The offer hung in the air like a lifeline, and for a moment I was tempted. 3 days of not worrying about money, of feeling normal again, of pretending my life hadn't completely imploded. But then I imagined trying to explain why I was working 2 illegal jobs, why I couldn't afford to pay my own way, why my parents had abandoned me in a foreign country. The humiliation would be worse than the poverty. Thanks, but I'm pretty swamped with work and classes, I said. Rain check. Sure thing. Hey, what's your Instagram? I'll tag you in some photos. Panic flared in my chest. Actually, I'm doing this whole social media detox thing. You know how it is. What I didn't say, I deactivated all my social media accounts after the third person from home had messaged asking why my parents were posting vacation photos to Napa Valley while claiming I was taking a gap semester to focus on my mental health. That night at Murphy's, I was distracted and clumsy. I dropped a tray of pints, mixed up orders, and snapped at a customer who complained his fish and chips were taking too long. Chen. Declan called me over during a brief lull. What's your malfunction tonight? Just tired. I'm working mornings now too. Jesus, kid. When do you sleep? I'm fine. You're not fine. You're running on fumes and it shows. He studied my face with concern. Look, I know it's not my business, but are you in some kind of trouble? Real trouble, not just broke college kid trouble. The question hit too close to home. For a moment, I considered telling him everything, about my parents, about being abandoned, about the constant fear that someone from school would realize I was working illegally and report me. Instead, I shook my head. I'm handling it. If you say so. But Chen. Whatever's going on, don't let it destroy you. I've seen plenty of kids come through here running from something. The ones who make it are the ones who know when to ask for help. Later that night, I sat in my room calculating expenses on the back of a napkin while Klaus packed his belongings. He was moving to premium housing tomorrow, leaving me alone for my final few days before eviction. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Financial Aid Office. Mr. Chen, we've received your application for emergency assistance. Unfortunately, family financial disputes do not qualify under our hardship criteria. However, we can offer you a payment plan for outstanding fees and discuss options for completing your semester remotely from the United States. Please schedule an appointment at your earliest convenience. Completing my semester remotely. That was their solution. Give up, go home, finish my classes online like some kind of academic charity case. I deleted the email and went back to my calculations. 3 more days until eviction. €1,247 in cash hidden in my backpack. 2 jobs that would disappear the moment I lost my student housing and had to report address changes to immigration. My phone rang. Unknown number, but with a California area code. For just a moment, hope flared in my chest. Maybe my parents had come to their senses. Maybe this nightmare was finally over. Jake. The voice was familiar but not the one I'd hoped for. It's Uncle Robert. Listen, we need to talk. Uncle Robert was my dad's younger brother, the one who'd always been a fun uncle at family gatherings, sneaking me extra dessert, teaching me card tricks, asking about my interests instead of just my grades. If anyone in my family might help, it would be him. Uncle Rob, thank God. I've been trying to reach someone for weeks. Jake, stop. His voice was stern in a way I'd never heard before. I'm not calling to help. I'm calling because your Aunt Lisa is worried you're going to do something stupid, and your parents asked me to talk sense into you. The words hit like ice water. Talk sense into me. This has gone on long enough. You're 19 years old, Jake, not some street kid. You have a family, you have options, but you're too damn stubborn to take them. His tone softened slightly. Look, I know your dad can be intense. But he loves you. They both do. This whole thing is killing your mother. It's killing her. I felt my voice rising and forced myself to stay calm. Other students were in the hallway outside my room. She blocked my phone number, Rob. They closed my bank accounts while I was 4,000 miles away. They left me with nothing. Because you left them no choice. You think you can just throw away everything they've sacrificed for you? Medical school, Jake. Do you have any idea what that degree would mean for your future? It's not my future if I don't want it. Jesus Christ, you sound just like your father when he was your age. Robert sighed heavily. Look, here's the deal. Your parents are willing to forgive this whole mess. They'll reinstate your accounts, pay your debts, bring you home for Christmas. All you have to do is call your dad and apologize. Admit you were wrong, commit to pre-med, and this nightmare ends. I was quiet for a long moment, listening to the international static on the line. In the background, I could hear a TV playing, probably the news. Uncle Robert was probably sitting in his comfortable living room in Sacramento, maybe having a beer, treating this conversation like a minor family inconvenience he needed to resolve. What did they tell you exactly? I asked finally. That you've been acting out since you got to Europe. Partying too much, grades slipping, talking about dropping out to pursue some fantasy about filmmaking. They said the money cutoff was tough love, to help you refocus on what matters. And you believe that? I believe you're a smart kid who's making dumb choices. Your parents aren't perfect, but abandoning your family over a career disagreement. Come on, Jake. There it was. Even Uncle Robert, who I thought might understand, had bought their version completely. In their telling, I wasn't a son who'd been abandoned abroad, I was a spoiled brat who'd run away from responsibility. Robert, I said quietly, did they tell you I'm living on €6 an hour washing dishes? That I haven't had a real meal in 3 days? That I'm about to be evicted from housing? Silence on the line. Did they mention that I tried calling them 17 times the first day, begging them to just talk to me? That I offered to compromise, to double major, to do anything except give up my own dreams completely? More silence. They painted quite a different picture, he said finally, his voice uncertain for the first time. I'm sure they did. I looked around my nearly empty dorm room, at Klaus's bare mattress, at my own belongings packed into 2 desperate suitcases. Tell me something, Rob. If your kids were struggling in a foreign country, would you make them grovel and surrender their entire identity just to get help? Jake. Would you? A long pause. No. I wouldn't. Then you know what you need to know. I ended the call before he could respond. 2 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a text, think about what I said. The offer stands, but not forever. Rob. I turned off my phone and finished packing. The next morning at Café Europa, I made a mistake that changed everything. I was running on 3 hours of sleep, my hands shaking from too much caffeine and not enough food, when I accidentally gave a table of German businessmen the wrong check. Instead of their €47 breakfast bill, I handed them the receipt I'd been using to calculate my desperate finances, the one with need, €3,088 written at the top in increasingly frantic handwriting, followed by crossed-out plans and impossible math. Entschuldigung, one of them said, handing it back with a concerned expression. I think this is yours. My face burned as I snatched the paper back, mumbling apologies, but the damage was done. I caught them whispering in German and glancing at me with that unmistakable look of pity. One actually left a €20 tip on a €15 bill, which somehow made everything worse. Jake, Hannah called me into the back after the lunch rush. We need to talk. I knew that tone. I'd been hearing it a lot lately. Some customers today, they say you look unwell. Very thin, very tired. She studied my face with the kind of attention I'd been trying to avoid. When did you last have real meal? Not just coffee and pastries. I'm fine, Hannah. Just busy with school. No. She shook her head firmly. You work here 2 weeks, you never eat. You drink maybe 6 espressos per shift. Your hands shake. This is not fine. She disappeared into the storage room and returned with a paper bag. Take this. Sandwiches, fruit, some cookies my mother made. And Jake? She pressed the bag into my hands. Tomorrow you eat lunch here. Real lunch. No arguments. Walking back to campus with Hannah's food, I felt something crack inside my chest. Not the dramatic breakdown I'd been expecting for weeks, but something smaller and more dangerous, the realization that a middle-aged Czech woman I'd known for 2 weeks was showing me more parental concern than my actual parents had in months. My phone buzzed. Klaus. Jake, where are you? Mrs. Novikova is back. She's got maintenance with her. I broke into a run. They were installing new locks when I arrived, breathing hard from sprinting across 3 tram stops. Mrs. Novikova looked up from her clipboard with what might have been genuine regret. Mr. Chen. I was hoping to catch you before we finished. I still have until Monday morning. You said Monday at 9 a.m. That was before we received additional information. She consulted her papers with practiced efficiency. Your work visa status has been flagged for review. Student Services discovered you've been employed off campus without proper authorization. My stomach dropped. Someone had reported me. Maybe one of those German businessmen from this morning, maybe another student who'd seen me at Murphy's, maybe just bad luck and bureaucratic cross-referencing. Until your visa review is complete, university policy requires immediate suspension of housing privileges. You have 2 hours to collect your belongings. Klaus appeared in the doorway, his face pale. Jake, I'm so sorry. My parents asked me directly if you were working illegally, and I couldn't lie to them. I didn't know they would call the school. 2 hours. I had 2 hours to figure out where I was going to sleep tonight. There is one option, Mrs. Novikova said quietly, glancing around to make sure the maintenance workers weren't listening. If you were to withdraw from the semester voluntarily, we could arrange immediate repatriation assistance. A flight home within 48 hours, no questions asked about the work visa issues. Meaning you could avoid formal deportation proceedings. Your record stays clean for future visa applications. She was offering me an escape hatch. A way to surrender with some dignity intact. The old Jake, the one who existed 3 weeks ago, would have taken it. Would have called his parents, apologized, and been home by Thursday. But that Jake had never worked 14-hour days for survival money. Had never felt the specific humiliation of counting coins for laundry. Had never learned that love could be switched off like a bank account. I need to think about it. You have 2 hours, she repeated, then paused. Jake. For what it's worth, I have children your age. What your parents did. She shook her head. 2 hours. As the maintenance crew finished with the locks, I sat on my packed suitcases in the hallway and opened Hannah's bag. Inside were 2 thick sandwiches, an apple, a banana, and a small container of what looked like homemade cookies wrapped in tissue paper. There was also a note, written in careful English, Jake, everyone needs help sometimes. This is not weakness. This is being human. H. I ate one of the sandwiches right there in the corridor, not caring who saw me. It was the first real meal I'd had in days, and for a moment I just focused on that, the taste of actual food, the feeling of my stomach unclenching slightly. When I finished eating, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to Declan at Murphy's. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you know anywhere I can sleep tonight? Anywhere at all. The second call took more courage. I scrolled through my contacts until I found a number I'd saved weeks ago but never used. Marco. It's Jake Chen. Are you still in Prague? Marco picked up on the second ring, his voice bright with surprise. Jake. Dude, perfect timing. I was just posting some photos from the castle. You change your mind about hanging out? I closed my eyes, swallowing what remained of my pride. Actually, yeah. Are you free tonight? Absolutely. I was getting bored drinking alone anyway. There's this amazing place I found near Wenceslas Square. Marco. I cut him off before I lost my nerve. I need to be straight with you about something. I'm not just picking up extra spending money at that cafe. I'm basically homeless as of about an hour ago, and I need somewhere to sleep tonight. The silence stretched long enough that I thought the call had dropped. Jesus, Jake. Are you serious? Dead serious. My parents cut me off completely a few weeks ago. I just got evicted from my dorm, and I've been working 2 illegal jobs just to eat. The words came out in a rush. I know we barely know each other, but I'm desperate. I can pay you back eventually, I just... Stop. Jesus, of course you can crash with me. I'm at the Hotel Golden Well near the castle. It's got 2 beds and my parents are paying for it anyway. His voice had completely changed, all the casual privilege replaced with genuine concern. How long has this been going on? 3 weeks. 3 weeks. Fuck, Jake, why didn't you call sooner? That was a good question. Why hadn't I called sooner? Pride, maybe. Or the fear that even my desperate situation would become gossip at schools back home, another story about Jake Chen's spectacular flameout in Europe. Can you meet me at the hotel in an hour? Marco continued. And bring whatever stuff you have. We'll figure this out. An hour later, I stood in the marble lobby of the Hotel Golden Well with my 2 battered suitcases, feeling like I was wearing a neon sign that said, "Doesn't belong here." The desk clerk looked me up and down with barely concealed suspicion before calling Marco's room. When Marco appeared, he took one look at me and his expression shifted to something like shock. Shit, you've lost weight. It's been a rough few weeks. He didn't ask more questions until we got to his room, which was easily 3 times the size of my old dorm space and had a view of Prague Castle that probably cost more per night than I made in a week. Okay, Marco said, settling into one of the leather chairs like he was conducting a business meeting. Tell me everything. And I mean everything. So I did. The whole story, from the fight with my parents to the bank accounts being closed, from washing dishes at 5 a.m. to getting evicted 2 hours ago. Marco listened without interrupting, his expression growing more horrified with each detail. Your parents actually had you legally cut off, he said when I finished. Like, with notarized documents. Apparently. That's not tough love, Jake. That's fucking sociopathic. He was quiet for a moment, processing. And you've been living on what, like 500 euros a month? Less than that after I pay for basic necessities. Marco stood up and started pacing, his expensive sneakers silent on the thick carpet. This is insane. You realize that, right? Parents don't just abandon their kids in foreign countries over college majors. Tell that to my Uncle Robert. Your family knows about this and they're not helping. I pulled out my phone and showed him Uncle Robert's text from yesterday. Marco read it twice, his jaw tightening. Unreal. They're actually trying to make this your fault. He looked up at me. Jake, you know this isn't normal, right? Whatever fucked up dynamic your family has, this isn't how normal people handle disagreements. Part of me wanted to defend them, some ingrained loyalty that 3 weeks of abandonment hadn't quite killed. But sitting in this hotel room, warm and safe for the first time in weeks, I could finally see the situation clearly. My parents hadn't just gotten angry. They'd systematically destroyed my ability to survive independently, then offered rescue only in exchange for complete surrender. It was manipulation on a level I was only beginning to understand. So what do I do now? Marco was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the castle lights. When he turned back to me, his expression was different, more serious than I'd ever seen him. How much do you need? To get through the semester, I mean. Real numbers. I pulled out my crumpled napkin with all the calculations. 3,088 euros to get my housing back and clear my debts. But honestly, even if I had that, they'd probably just find another reason to kick me out once they finish investigating the work visa thing. What if money wasn't the issue? Like, what if you could pay everything off tomorrow? I laughed bitterly. Then I'd still be fucked because I'd have to explain where I got 3,000 euros, and they're already suspicious about. Jake. Marco cut me off. What if I loaned it to you? The words hung in the air like something too dangerous to touch. Marco, that's a massive amount of money. Not to my family it isn't. He said it matter-of-factly, without the usual humble bragging that rich kids do. My dad spends more than that on wine in a month. My mom's purse collection is worth like 50 grand. I can't pay you back. Not anytime soon. I'm not asking you to. He sat down across from me, leaning forward. Look, I've been thinking about this whole thing, and it's fucking me up. Like, what your parents did to you. It's genuinely evil. And I'm sitting here in a hotel room that costs 400 euros a night, worried about whether to order the 35 euro steak or the 40 euro lamb chops for dinner. That's not your fault. No, but it's my responsibility. My parents always lecture me about privilege and giving back and all that shit, but it's just talk. This is real. His voice was getting more animated. You're literally sleeping on the street because you wanted to study film instead of medicine. That's dystopian. I wanted to argue, but the truth was I was too exhausted to refuse help anymore. 3 weeks of survival mode had worn down all my noble instincts. Even if you could loan me the money, it's more complicated now. They're reviewing my visa status. If they decide I violated the terms by working off campus, then we make sure they don't decide that. Marco was already reaching for his phone. My dad knows people everywhere. Immigration lawyers, university administrators, embassy contacts. Money talks, and bullshit walks, his favorite saying. Marco, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm offering. He was scrolling through his contacts. Besides, I'm getting something out of this too. What? He looked up with a grin that reminded me why we'd gotten along at orientation. The greatest fuck you story in the history of rich kid problems. When I tell my parents I used their money to save someone from actual hardship instead of buying another designer watch, they're going to lose their minds with pride. Despite everything, I found myself smiling for the first time in weeks. You're seriously going to call your dad right now? It's 2 p.m. in New York. He's probably in some boring meeting that could have been an email. Marco was already dialing. Dad? Yeah, it's me. Listen, I need you to wire me some money. Like, 5,000 euros. Tonight if possible. I could hear his father's voice through the phone, questioning, concerned. It's not for me, it's for a friend who's in serious trouble. No, not drugs. His parents abandoned him in Prague and he's about to get deported. Yes, I'm completely serious. Dad, just trust me on this one. The conversation continued for 10 minutes, Marco explaining the situation with increasing passion while his father apparently asked detailed questions. Finally, Marco handed me the phone. He wants to talk to you directly. Jake. This is David Weinstein, Marco's father. The voice was crisp, authoritative, exactly what I'd expected from a Manhattan lawyer. Marco's told me about your situation. I need to ask you some direct questions. Of course, sir. First, is everything my son told me accurate? Your parents actually cut off all financial support while you're studying abroad? Yes, sir. They closed my bank accounts, canceled my credit cards, and blocked all communication after an argument about my major. And you've been working illegally to survive? I hesitated. Admitting this to a lawyer felt like confessing to a crime. Yes. 2 jobs, both paying under the table. How long? 3 weeks. There was a pause, and I heard papers rustling. Marco says you need roughly 3,000 euros to resolve your immediate housing and academic issues. Is that correct? Yes, but Mr. Weinstein, I should be clear, I have no way to pay this back in the foreseeable future. My parents have made it obvious they won't help, and I'm barely surviving as it is. Jake, let me tell you something. I've been practicing law for 25 years, and I've seen plenty of family disputes. What your parents did isn't tough love, it's abandonment. In some states, it would actually be criminal. His voice hardened. No parent should leave their child stranded in a foreign country, regardless of the disagreement. Sir, I appreciate that, but I'm not finished. The lawyer voice was in full effect now. Marco tells me you're a film studies student. I want to be. My parents insisted on pre-med. My brother's a film producer in Los Angeles. Makes more money than I do, and he loves his job. Your parents are idiots. I heard him typing. I'm wiring 5,000 euros to Marco's account tonight. That should cover your immediate needs plus a buffer for living expenses. Mr. Weinstein, I can't accept. You're not accepting charity. You're accepting an investment. More typing. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take this money and stabilize your situation. Get your housing back, clear your debts, focus on your studies. When you graduate and start your career, whatever career you choose, you'll pay it forward to someone else who needs help. The concept was so foreign after weeks of transactional survival that I couldn't immediately process it. Pay it forward. Help someone else the way we're helping you. Maybe not financially, but however you can. The money's not a loan, Jake. It's a responsibility. I felt something strange happening to my vision, and realized I was crying for the first time since this whole nightmare began. Not the angry, frustrated tears I'd been holding back, but something deeper. Why? I managed to ask. Because Marco called me more excited than he's been in years. Because helping you makes him feel like his privilege actually means something. And because. David Weinstein paused. Because I have a son your age, and if he were stranded somewhere, I'd hope someone would help him. Marco was grinning at me from across the room, giving me 2 thumbs up. The money will be available tomorrow morning, Mr. Weinstein continued. Marco has the account details. But Jake. When this is over, when you're back on your feet, I want you to remember exactly how this felt. Remember what it's like to be abandoned by the people who should love you unconditionally. I will, sir. Good. Because someday, when you have the power to help someone else, that memory is going to matter. After I hung up, Marco and I sat in silence for a moment. Your dad just saved my life, I said finally. Nah, Marco replied, but he was smiling. You saved your own life. We just threw you a rope. That night, lying in an actual bed for the first time in days, I stared at the ceiling and thought about Mr. Weinstein's words. Remember how this felt. I would. Every humiliation, every moment of terror, every night wondering where I'd sleep. And someday, my parents were going to remember too. The wire transfer came through at 9:23 a.m. Prague time. I stared at the number on Marco's phone screen, 5,000 euros, like it was written in a foreign language I couldn't quite translate. More money than I'd ever seen in one place, certainly more than I'd ever controlled personally. Holy shit, I whispered. Yeah, Marco agreed, refreshing the banking app one more time to make sure it was real. Dad doesn't mess around when he decides to help someone. By noon, I was sitting across from Mrs. Novikova in the housing office, watching her expression shift from bureaucratic indifference to barely concealed shock as I counted out 3,088 euros in cash on her desk. The bills were crisp and new. Marco had insisted we get them from his hotel's concierge service rather than some sketchy currency exchange. This covers everything, I said, sliding the pile toward her. Housing through December, meal plan, outstanding fees. All of it. She picked up the money with the careful attention of someone who'd clearly never had a student pay a semester's worth of expenses in cash. Mr. Chen, I must ask, where did this come from? A private loan from a friend's family. A friend's family. Her tone suggested she was imagining drug deals or stolen credit cards. You understand that we'll need documentation for any amount over 2,000 euros. Anti-money laundering regulations. Of course there would be more bureaucratic hurdles. There always were. What kind of documentation? A letter from the lender stating the source of funds and the terms of the loan. Notarized, preferably. She was already pulling forms from her desk drawer. Also, we'll need to resolve the work visa issue before we can reinstate your housing. My stomach clenched. I'd been so focused on getting the money that I'd forgotten about the other half of my problems. What exactly does that involve? An interview with Immigration Services. They'll want to know details about your unauthorized employment, where you worked, for how long, how much you were paid. She studied my face with something that might have been sympathy. I should warn you, Mr. Chen. Even if you pay your university debts, immigration has the authority to revoke your student visa. 2 hours later, I was back at Murphy's, but this time as a customer rather than an employee. Declan looked surprised to see me sitting at one of the corner tables during the slow afternoon period. Chen. Thought you might be in jail by now, or deported, or something equally dramatic. He slid into the seat across from me. What's the story? I explained the money, the housing payment, the immigration interview scheduled for Friday. Declan listened with the same focused attention I'd seen him give to difficult customers or complicated drink orders. Immigration interview, eh? He drummed his fingers on the table when I finished. That's a problem. How much of a problem? Depends who you get. Some of those officers, they're reasonable people who understand that students sometimes bend the rules to survive. Others. He shrugged. Others think any violation should mean immediate deportation. And you can't predict which type I'll get. Nope. But Chen, I gotta tell you something. He leaned forward, lowering his voice even though the pub was nearly empty. Someone called asking about you yesterday. My blood went cold. What kind of someone? Official someone. Said they were conducting a routine check on your employment status, wanted to know how long you'd worked here, whether I'd verified your work authorization. Declan's expression was grim. I told them you'd never been officially employed, that you'd just helped out for tips a few times while waiting for your paperwork to process. Did they believe you? Hard to say. But Chen, here's the thing, they knew details. Specific dates, how much you made on certain nights, even which tables you'd served. He paused meaningfully. That's not information they'd have unless someone who was here regularly gave it to them. The implication hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone reported me. Someone who watched me work. That's what I'm thinking. Question is, who? And why now? I thought back through the faces I'd served over the past 3 weeks. Dozens of tourists, business travelers, other students. Any one of them could have decided that an American kid working illegally was worth a phone call to immigration. Or maybe it was simpler than that. Maybe Klaus's parents hadn't just called the university about my housing situation. Maybe they'd been thorough. Declan, if they ask you directly in an official interview, what are you going to say? He was quiet for a long moment, staring into his pint. I'm going to tell the truth, Chen. I like you, but I'm not going to perjure myself for anyone. I understand. But, he continued, the truth is complicated. You did help out here for tips. You were waiting for work authorization. Sometimes paperwork takes time to process. He met my eyes. Those are all true statements. I nodded, understanding the distinction he was making. He wouldn't lie for me, but he also wouldn't volunteer information that would destroy me. Walking back toward campus, I called Marco to update him on the situation. So even with the money, you might still get deported, he said after I explained about the immigration interview. It's possible. Probably likely, actually. That's fucked up. You pay your debts, follow their rules, and they still want to punish you for surviving? Marco was quiet for a moment. Jake, do you want my dad to make some calls? He mentioned having contacts at the embassy. The offer was tempting, but something held me back. Let me try handling it myself first. If I can't make it work, then we bring in the big guns. Got it. That evening, I sat in my reinstated dorm room. Klaus's replacement wouldn't arrive until next week, and drafted a letter to the immigration officer I'd be meeting with on Friday. Not an excuse or an apology, but an explanation. A clear, honest account of why I'd made the choices I'd made. As I wrote, one thought kept circling back. My parents still had no idea what I'd been through. In their minds, I was probably still the spoiled kid who needed to learn a lesson about gratitude and responsibility. But Friday's interview would determine whether I'd have the chance to teach them a lesson of my own. Or whether I'd be on a plane back to California by weekend, tail between my legs, forced to crawl back to their conditional love after all. The immigration interview was scheduled for 2 p.m. on Friday at the Ministry of the Interior building, a gray concrete monument to bureaucratic efficiency that looked like it had been designed to crush human hope. I arrived 20 minutes early, wearing my only clean button-down shirt and the single pair of dress pants I'd packed for my semester abroad, back when my biggest concern was looking presentable for academic presentations. The waiting room was filled with people clutching folders of documents, speaking in nervous whispers in a dozen different languages. A woman with 2 small children kept checking her watch and muttering in what sounded like Arabic. An older man in an expensive suit was making aggressive phone calls in Russian. Everyone looked like they had more at stake than I did, which somehow made me feel worse rather than better. Jacob Chin. The voice belonged to a thin woman in her 40s with steel-rimmed glasses and a kind of expression that suggested she'd heard every sob story in the book. I am Ms. Craddockville. Please follow me. Her office was as impersonal as expected, government-issued desk, filing cabinets, a single dyeing plant on the windowsill. She gestured for me to sit across from her, then opened a folder that I assumed contained everything the Czech Republic knew about my recent life. Mr. Chen, you are here because your student visa status has been called into question. Specifically, allegations that you have been working without proper authorization. She adjusted her glasses and consulted the file. Before we begin, I want to be clear that this is not a criminal proceeding. However, visa violations can result in immediate termination of your legal status and removal from the country. I understand. Good. Now, it says here that you have been employed at 2 establishments, Murphy's Corner and Café Europa. Is this correct? My carefully rehearsed explanation suddenly felt inadequate. I helped out at both places for tips while waiting for work authorization paperwork to be processed. Helped out. She made a note. And how long were you helping out at these establishments? About 3 weeks total. 3 weeks. During which time you received monetary compensation for your services. Tips only. Not wages. Ms. Craddockville looked up from her notes. Mr. Chen, I have statements from both employers. According to the manager at Cafe Europa, you worked regular morning shifts from 5 a.m. to 11 a.m., 6 days a week. At Murphy's Corner, you worked evening shifts 3 to 4 nights per week. This doesn't sound like helping out, this sounds like employment. Shit. Hannah and Declan had been more honest than I'd hoped, or less diplomatic than I'd expected. The thing is, I said, abandoning my careful script, I was abandoned by my parents 3 weeks ago. They closed my bank accounts, cancelled my cards, and left me with 73 euros in cash and no way to pay for housing or food. That's unfortunate, but it doesn't change Czech employment law. No, but it explains why I made the choices I made. I pulled out the folder Marco had helped me prepare. I have documentation showing that my parents formally withdrew financial support while I was abroad. Bank statements showing my accounts were closed. University records showing I was facing eviction from housing. She accepted the papers and began reading with bureaucratic thoroughness. As the minutes ticked by, I watched her expression shift from skeptical to surprised to something that might have been concern. Your parents closed your accounts remotely while you were studying here, she asked finally. 3 days after an argument about my choice of major. They wanted me to study medicine. I wanted to study film. MS. Craddockville was quiet for a long moment, still reading through the documentation. When she looked up again, her expression had changed entirely. Mr. Chen, in 15 years of conducting these interviews, I have never seen a case quite like this. Ms. Craddockville closed the folder and leaned back in her chair, studying me with new attention. Mr. Chen, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest. Did your parents know you would be forced to work illegally when they cut off your funding? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I mean, did they understand that removing all financial support would leave you with no legal means of survival? That you would be forced to choose between working without authorization or becoming homeless? I thought about it carefully. They had to know. They'd been paying for my expenses here for months, they knew exactly what everything cost. When they closed the accounts, they knew I had less than 100 euros in cash. She made several notes, then pulled out a different form I hadn't seen before. Mr. Chen, what I'm about to tell you is unusual, but your case presents some unique circumstances. Under Czech law, student visa violations typically result in automatic deportation. However, there are provisions for extraordinary hardship cases. My heart started beating faster. What kind of provisions? If we can demonstrate that the visa violation was the direct result of abandonment or abuse by family members, and that the student took reasonable steps to resolve the situation through legal means first, the ministry has discretionary authority to issue a formal warning instead of deportation. A warning? You would remain on probationary status for the remainder of your studies. Any further violations would result in immediate removal. But you could continue your semester. She pulled out a pen. However, I would need additional documentation. What kind of documentation? Evidence that you attempted to resolve this situation through proper channels before resorting to unauthorized employment. Contact with your embassy, university financial aid office, family members who might have helped. She looked up from the form. Also, evidence that your current financial situation has been resolved through legal means. I reached into my folder and pulled out more papers. I have emails showing I contacted the university financial aid office and the American consulate. Phone records showing multiple attempts to reach family members. And yesterday I paid all my outstanding fees through a legitimate loan from a friend's family. Ms. Craddockville reviewed each document with meticulous care. The loan documentation shows 5,000 euros from a David Weinstein in New York. How do you know this person? He's the father of another American student I met through the study abroad program. When he learned about my situation, he offered to help. And you had never met this family before your financial crisis? I'd met his son Marco once, briefly, at orientation. But no, I'd never met Mr. Weinstein. She made more notes, then looked up with an expression I couldn't read. Mr. Chen, I'm going to ask you one more question, and your answer will determine how I proceed. If I grant you probationary status and allow you to complete your semester, what are your plans regarding your family situation? The question hung in the air like a challenge. What were my plans? For 3 weeks, I'd been so focused on day-to-day survival that I hadn't thought beyond making it to Christmas break. But now, sitting in this sterile office with my fate hanging in the balance, something crystallized in my mind. My parents thought they were teaching me a lesson about consequences and responsibility. They'd abandoned their 19-year-old son in a foreign country, confident that desperation would eventually force me to surrender completely to their vision of my life. They had no idea that I'd not only survived, but found people who cared more about my well-being than they did. They didn't know about Hannah making sure I ate real meals, or Declan treating me with more respect than my own father ever had, or the Weinstein family investing in my future without demanding control over my choices. My parents thought they held all the power in our relationship. They were wrong. My plans are to finish my semester, maintain my grades, and complete my degree in film studies, I said finally. As for my family, I met Ms. Craddockville's eyes. I planned to show them exactly what their choices cost them. She nodded slowly, as if she'd been expecting that answer. Very well, Mr. Chen. I'll have my decision by Monday morning. The notification came through exactly 18 months later, as I was editing my final film project in a USC cinema building. Spring semester, senior year, 3 weeks before graduation. The Google alert I'd set up pinged on my laptop, Robert and Linda Chen vacation. I clicked through to my dad's company newsletter, the quarterly publication that always featured employee spotlights and community involvement. There they were in the congratulations section. Robert and Linda Chen will be celebrating their 25th wedding anniversary with a dream vacation to Italy, visiting Rome, Florence, and the Amalfi Coast. The trip has been planned for over a year and represents a once-in-a-lifetime journey for the couple. The accompanying photo showed them at some company party, holding champagne glasses, my mother wearing the kind of forced smile she'd perfected for social events. The article mentioned their departure date, March 15th, 6 days from now. I'd been waiting for this moment since MS. Craddockville had granted me probationary status and I'd finished my semester in Prague. Since I'd returned to the States and enrolled at USC as a transfer student, using my experience abroad as the centerpiece of my application essays. Since I'd maintained exactly zero contact with my parents for over a year and a half, watching from a distance as they told relatives I was taking time to mature and working through some personal issues. The plan had been forming in my mind for months, but I'd needed the right opportunity. A moment when they'd be vulnerable, far from home, dependent on systems they couldn't control. Just like they'd left me. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I'd memorized but never used. Weinstein, Chen and Associates, this is David Weinstein. Mr. Weinstein. It's Jake Chen. Jake. Good to hear from you, son. How's the final semester going? Really well, actually. I'm graduating in May, and I've already got a production assistant job lined up at Warner Brothers. I paused. Mr. Weinstein, I need to ask you for one more favor. The last one, I promise. What do you need? I need to hire your firm for a very specific legal service. And I need it to happen in exactly 6 days. The beauty of having a high-powered attorney in your corner is that David Weinstein had contacts everywhere. Including contacts who owed him favors. Including contacts in the banking industry who understood that sometimes accounts needed to be temporarily frozen pending routine verification procedures, especially when those accounts showed unusual activity patterns, like large international transactions right before overseas travel. The process was entirely legal. Banks regularly froze accounts when sophisticated algorithms detected potentially fraudulent activity. And there was nothing more suspicious looking to a banking algorithm than Robert Chen suddenly trying to access funds from Rome Fiumicino Airport after his debit cards had been remotely flagged for security verification. The passport issue was even simpler. I'd kept detailed records from Prague, including the documentation showing how my parents had formally withdrawn support while I was abroad. David's contacts at the State Department were very interested to learn that the Chens might be planning to abandon another family member overseas, this time my mother's elderly sister, who they'd listed as traveling with them on their visa applications but who was actually in a nursing home in Sacramento. Suspicious travel patterns. Potential elder abuse. Definitely grounds for additional passport verification requirements. I was sitting in a coffee shop near LAX when my phone rang. Unknown international number. Jake. Jake, thank God, it's Mom. I'd imagined this moment hundreds of times, but hearing her voice, panicked, desperate, exactly the way mine had sounded when I'd called them from Prague, still sent a jolt through my system. Mom. I kept my voice neutral, curious. Where are you calling from? Rome. Jake, we're in trouble. Someone's frozen our bank accounts, and they're saying there's an issue with our passports. We can't get money, we can't change our flights home, we're stuck at the airport and... That sounds terrible, I said, taking a sip of my latte. Have you tried calling the embassy? They said it could take weeks to resolve. Jake, we need help. We need you to wire us money, or call your Uncle Robert, or... Her voice cracked. We don't know what to do. The silence stretched between us across continents. I could hear airport announcements in the background, could picture them stranded in some terminal with their expensive luggage and their carefully planned itinerary falling apart around them. Jake? Are you there? I'm here, Mom. I'm just thinking. Another sip of coffee. You know, this reminds me of something that happened to me once. When I was in Prague. The line went very quiet. I was stranded too, I continued conversationally. No money, no way home, no idea where I'd sleep that night. And do you know what happened when I called my parents for help? I hung up and blocked the number. 20 minutes later, my dad called from a different phone. Then Uncle Robert. Then 3 cousins I barely knew. I blocked them all. That evening, as I put the finishing touches on my senior thesis film, a short documentary about family relationships and conditional love, I thought about Ms. Craddock's question, what are your plans regarding your family situation? Now I knew the answer. My plan was to let them learn the same lesson they tried to teach me, that love without conditions isn't really love at all. The only difference was, I'd be here when they finally made it home. If they wanted to rebuild our relationship, they were welcome to try. But this time, it would be on my terms.